The bathroom light was too bright. It reflected off the white tiles, making the room feel like an operating theater. Elena sat on the edge of the toilet seat, her silk robe slipping off one shoulder. In her right hand, she held the syringe. It was the 1825th time she had done this. 5 years. 60 months. Countless cycles of hope and devastating failure. She looked at her stomach. It was a map of trauma. Purple and yellow bruises bloomed across her pale skin, overlapping like petals of a grotesque flower. There was hardly a patch of clear skin left to inject the hormones. Mark stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He looked perfect. His suit was crisp, his hair combed back, his face carrying that signature expression of patient, long-suffering love. "Do you want me to do it, Elle?" he asked softly. His voice was warm, like honey. It was the voice that had convinced her to marry him 6 years ago. It was the voice that whispered comfort when she wept over negative pregnancy tests in the middle of the night. "No," Elena whispered, her hand trembling slightly. "I have to do it. Doctor Sterling said I need to take ownership of the process." She pinched a fold of skin on her left side, finding a spot that looked less tender than the rest. She took a breath, squeezed her eyes shut, and jabbed the needle in. The burn was immediate. The liquid fire of synthetic hormones flooding her system, tricking her body into thinking it was ready to create life. She pulled the needle out and dropped it into the red sharps container on the counter. It was full. Another month, another bin full of needles. She looked up at Mark. He was smiling sadly. He walked over and kissed her forehead. "You are so strong," he murmured into her hair. "I don't know how you do it. Most women would have given up by now. But not you. You are a fighter." "I feel broken, Mark," she said, her voice cracking. "I feel like a defective machine. Why can't I do the one thing a woman is supposed to do?" Mark sighed, pulling her into his chest. He smelled of expensive cologne and starch. "Shoo, don't say that. Dr. Sterling said it is just a matter of egg quality. Your body is just fighting it a little. But we will win. We always win." He checked his watch. "I have to head to the office. Big merger today. Are you seeing Sterling at 2 p.m.? "Yes," Elena said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "He wants to check the follicle growth." "Good. Call me right after. I want to know if we are good for retrieval next week." He kissed her again, lingering for a second too long, and then turned and left. Elena listened to his footsteps fading down the hallway, then the heavy thud of the front door closing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena stood up and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. 5 years ago, she had been vibrant. She had been a marketing executive with a corner office. She had run marathons. Now, she was a professional patient. She had quit her job 2 years ago because the stress was bad for the baby. Mark had insisted. He made plenty of money, he said. Her only job was to relax and get pregnant. But she wasn't relaxed. She was a cocktail of synthetic emotions. The drugs made her manic 1 minute and depressive the next. She had gained 20 pounds. Her hair was thinning. She felt like a science experiment that had gone wrong. She showered, dressed in loose clothes that didn't press on her bruised abdomen, and drove to the clinic. The fertility center of New York was a place of hushed tones and plush carpets. It smelled of lavender and money. Dr. Sterling was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He had been their doctor for 4 years. Mark played golf with him. They were friends. That comforted Elena. It made her feel like she was in special hands. "Elena, good to see you," Dr. Sterling said, entering the exam room. "Let's take a look." The ultrasound was a familiar humiliation. The cold gel. The pressure. The grainy black and white image on the screen that was always empty. Sterling squinted at the monitor. He clicked a few buttons, measuring black circles that represented her hope. He made a noncommittal sound. What? Elena asked, panic rising in her chest instantly. Is something wrong? Sterling sat back, wiping the wand with a towel. The response isn't what we hoped for, Elena. The follicles are small. Your estrogen levels are plateauing. Tears pricked her eyes. Again. It was happening again. Is it me? She whispered. Sterling sighed, taking off his glasses. He looked at her with a mix of pity and professional detachment. We have discussed this, Elena. Your ovarian reserve is critically low. And the lining of your uterus is hostile. It is rejecting the implantation. We are doing everything we can, but your body is simply not cooperating. He stood up and patted her shoulder. Mark is a saint for sticking through this, you know. Most men, well, they have limits. But he is very committed to having a child with you. We will up the dosage of Menopur. Come back in 3 days. Elena walked out of the clinic feeling like she was carrying a lead weight in her stomach. A hostile uterus. A defective body. And a saint of a husband who put up with her failure. She drove home in a daze. When she entered the house, the silence was different. It was heavy. She walked into Mark's study. She rarely went in there. It was his sanctuary. But she needed to find her passport. They were talking about flying to a specialist in Europe if this cycle failed, and she needed to check the expiration date. She opened the bottom drawer of his massive oak desk. It was locked. She frowned. Mark never locked the drawers. He always said they had no secrets. She tugged on it again. Locked. She looked around the room. On the bookshelf, behind a row of law books, sat a small digital safe. She knew the code. It was their anniversary. October 12, 18. She hesitated. She wasn't looking for money. She just needed the documents. She typed in the code. Beep. 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 The light turned green. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, there were stacks of cash, some watches, and a thick leather folder. Elena pulled out the folder. She opened it, expecting to find deeds or insurance policies. Instead, she found a medical file. It wasn't hers. It was Mark's. The logo on the top of the page was from a clinic in Miami. South Beach Urological Institute. The date on the document was June 14, 2017. Elena froze. They had met in 2018. They got married in 2019. Her eyes scanned the paper, trying to make sense of the medical jargon. But the summary at the bottom was in plain English. Procedure, bilateral vasectomy. Surgeon, Dr. A. Rossi. Notes, procedure successful. Patient is sterile. Sperm count, 0. Elena read it again. And again. Patient is sterile. She felt the room spin. She grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Sterile. Mark was sterile. He had been sterile since before they met. Her hand shook as she turned the page. There was another document. A receipt. It was a bank transfer. Dated 4 years ago. The recipient was Sterling Medical Corporation. The amount was $50,000. The memo line read, consulting fees. Elena dropped the folder. The paper scattered across the Persian rug like fallen leaves. 5 years. 5 years of needles. 5 years of hormones destroying her body. 5 years of crying in the bathroom while he held her and told her she was brave. 5 years of feeling like a failure. 5 years of Dr. Sterling telling her she had a hostile uterus. It wasn't her. It had never been her. Mark had sterilized himself. And then he had paid her doctor $50,000 to lie to her face. To inject her with drugs she didn't need. To watch her suffer. Why? The question screamed in her mind. Why would he do this? Then she remembered his words from this morning. I don't know how you do it, you are a fighter. Most women would have given up. He didn't want a child. He wanted a broken wife. He wanted to be the saint who stayed with the barren woman. He wanted her gratitude. He wanted her total, absolute submission. The front door opened downstairs. Honey? Mark's voice floated up the stairs. Cheerful. Loving. False. Elena looked at the papers on the floor. She looked at the bruises on her stomach. The tears stopped instantly. Elena moved faster than she ever thought possible. Her hands, usually trembling from the side effects of the hormones, were suddenly steady with adrenaline. She grabbed the medical file and the bank transfer receipt. She didn't have time to put them back in the folder. She shoved them under her oversized sweater, pressing the cold paper against her skin. She kicked the remaining papers under the heavy oak desk just as the doorknob turned. Mark walked in. He was loosening his tie, a look of concern etched on his handsome face. He saw her standing in the middle of the room, her back to his desk, her face pale and streaked with tears. Elena? He asked, his voice dropping to that soothing, hypnotic register. What are you doing in here? I was looking for a pen, she lied. The lie tasted like copper in her mouth. I wanted to write down what Dr. Sterling said. I didn't want to forget. Mark crossed the room in 3 long strides. He didn't look at the desk. He didn't look at the floor where a single sheet of paper, a list of asset allocations, was peeking out from under the wood. He only looked at her. He wrapped his arms around her. Elena flinched. His touch, which used to be her anchor, now felt like a brand. It felt like a spider crawling over her skin. Shoo, it is okay, he whispered, stroking her hair. You don't have to write it down. We will handle it together. Did Sterling say the lining is still thin? Elena buried her face in his chest to hide her expression. If he looked into her eyes right now, he would see the murder. Yes, she mumbled into his shirt. He said my body is hostile. Mark sighed, a long, tragic sound that vibrated against her chest. My poor brave girl. It is so unfair. But we won't give up. I will work harder. I will make sure we have the money for the best treatments. You just focus on staying calm. Stress poisons the womb, remember? Stress poisons the womb. It was his favorite phrase. A subtle way of blaming her. If the cycle failed, it wasn't the biology, it was her anxiety. Her lack of faith. I need to lie down, she said, pulling away. My head is splitting. Of course. Go. I will order dinner. Something healthy. Maybe that quinoa salad you hate but Sterling recommends. Elena walked out of the study, her legs feeling like jelly. She went straight to the master bedroom, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. She pulled the crumpled papers from her shirt. She read them again. The vasectomy was dated June 14, 2017. The payment to Sterling was dated August 2018. He had planned this. He had planned it before the wedding. He had sterilized himself, then married a woman who desperately wanted a family, just to watch her destroy herself trying to achieve the impossible. Why? She looked at the mirror. She looked at the woman Mark had created. Weak. Dependent. Grateful. That was it. If she had a child, she would love the child more than him. If she had a career, she would have independence. But as a broken, barren woman, she had only him. He was her savior. He was the only one who would tolerate her defect. It was psychological cannibalism. He was feeding on her despair. Elena took her phone. She needed to take pictures of the documents. She needed digital proof. Her hands shook as she snapped the photos, uploading them to a secret Dropbox account she used for old design portfolios. Then she heard a knock on the door. Elena? Dinner is here. Open up, honey. Why is the door locked? His voice had a slight edge to it. A tiny crack in the perfect facade. Mark didn't like locked doors. He didn't like boundaries. Elena hid the papers between the mattress and the box spring. She wiped her face, pinched her cheeks to bring back some color, and opened the door. Mark was standing there with a tray. A green salad. A glass of water. And a small white pill. Your evening supplement, he said, smiling. Sterling called me. He said you seemed agitated today. He prescribed a mild sedative to help you sleep. Elena looked at the pill. It wasn't a sedative. She recognized the shape. It was estrase. Estrogen. But the dosage, it was the wrong color. This was double the normal dose. If she took this on top of her injections, her liver would be screaming by morning. Thank you, she said, taking the pill. You are so good to me. I try, he said, kissing her cheek. She put the pill in her mouth. She didn't swallow. She took a sip of water, holding the bitter tablet under her tongue. I am going to eat in bed, she said. I am really not feeling well. Okay. I have some work to do anyway. I will be in the study. The study. Elena's heart stopped. The papers on the floor. Wait. She said, too loudly. Mark turned back, his eyebrows raised. Can you stay with me? Just for a little bit? I don't want to be alone. Mark smiled. A satisfied, predatory smile. This was what he wanted. Her begging for his presence. Of course, my love. The work can wait. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched her eat the salad. He watched her swallow the pill. He stroked her leg, talking about their future, about how maybe they should look into surrogacy in a few years, but it was so expensive, and he didn't want to risk their retirement. He was already laying the groundwork for the next phase of the torture. When he finally went to the bathroom to brush his teeth, Elena spat the dissolving pill into a tissue and flushed it down the toilet. She waited until he was asleep. His breathing was deep and rhythmic. The sleep of the righteous. Or the sociopathic. Elena crept out of bed. She needed to leave. Not now, but soon. And she needed to know exactly what had been done to her body. She went to the bathroom and dug through the trash can where she threw her empty medication boxes. She took one of the vials of Menopur. She looked closely at the label. It looked professional. But the batch number, it was smeared. She took the vial and slipped it into her pocket. The next morning, Mark left for work early. He was in high spirits. He kissed her goodbye and told her to rest. As soon as his car left the driveway, Elena dressed. She didn't go to Dr. Sterling. She drove 2 hours to a clinic in New Jersey. A walk-in lab where no one knew her name. I need a full toxicology screen, she told the nurse. And I need you to test the contents of this vial. The nurse looked at her bruised arms and the desperation in her eyes. Honey, are you safe? The nurse asked quietly. No, Elena said. I am not. But I need to know if I am dying. She waited 3 hours for the rush results. She sat in the plastic chair, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of the last 5 years. Every tear he had wiped away. Every injection he had helped her prepare. It was all a play. A sick, twisted theater production written, directed, and produced by Mark. The nurse came back. She was holding a clipboard, and her face was grim. Mrs. Vance? Yes. We tested the vial. It is not Menopur. Elena felt the floor tilt. What is it? It is a high-concentration saline solution mixed with mild inflammatory agents. It is basically salt water designed to cause swelling and bruising. Salt water. He wasn't just sterilizing himself. He was giving her fake medicine. But the blood work? Elena whispered. My hormones. I feel the side effects. The mood swings. The weight gain. The nurse looked at the other paper. That is the toxicology report. You have extremely high levels of prednisone and synthetic estrogen in your system. Dangerous levels. Elena closed her eyes. The supplements. The pills he gave her every night with dinner. The vitamins he insisted she take for egg quality. He was poisoning her. Systematically. Enough to make her sick, emotional, and physically weak. Enough to make her look broken to the outside world. But not enough to kill her. Yet. Elena stood up. A cold rage settled in her chest, replacing the fear. He wanted a helpless wife? He wanted a tragedy? Fine. She would give him a tragedy. She walked out of the clinic and dialed a number. Not the police. Not a lawyer. She called the medical board anonymous tip line. I want to report a doctor for malpractice and illegal distribution of controlled substances, she said, her voice steady. Dr. Arthur Sterling. And then she drove to a hardware store. She bought a new lock for the bedroom door. And she bought a hidden camera. If Mark wanted to play doctor, they were going to play a new game. It was called The Autopsy. And she was going to be the surgeon. The hidden camera was the size of a button. Elena had wedged it between the cookbooks on the kitchen shelf, the lens pointing directly at the island counter where Mark prepared his nightly wellness tea. She sat in the living room, her phone hidden behind a magazine, watching the live feed. Her hands were cold. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. Mark walked into the frame. He was humming. He looked relaxed, happy even. He opened the cupboard and took out the tin of organic chamomile. Then, he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small glass vial. Elena zoomed in on the screen. The resolution was grainy, but the action was clear. He unscrewed the cap and tapped a fine white powder into her mug. He didn't just add a pinch. He added a heap. Then he poured the boiling water over it and stirred. He stirred it for a long time. Clink. 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 The sound of the spoon hitting the ceramic echoed through the house, even though she was watching it on mute. It was the sound of her slow execution. He picked up the mugs, one for him, one for her, and walked out of the kitchen. Elena locked her phone and shoved it under the sofa cushion just as he entered the living room. Here you go, darling, he said, placing the steaming mug on the coaster in front of her. Dr. Sterling said this blend is great for reducing inflammation. Drink up. Elena looked at the tea. It smelled like chamomile and betrayal. She looked at Mark. He was sipping his own tea, watching the evening news. He looked so normal. So human. It was terrifying how well the monster wore the skin of a husband. I can't drink this, Mark, she said softly. He turned to look at her, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before he smoothed it over. Why not? It is good for you. You need to relax. Because I know what is in it, she said. The silence that followed was absolute. The television murmured in the background, a weatherman predicting rain, but in the room, the air had turned to vacuum. This was the cold pause. Mark slowly lowered his mug. He didn't look scared. He looked calculated. What are you talking about, Elena? You are being paranoid again. Is this the hormones talking? No, Elena said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled paper. The copy of the vasectomy report. She placed it on the coffee table between them. And I know about this. Mark looked at the paper. He didn't pick it up. He stared at the logo of the South Beach Urological Institute. He stared at the date, June 14, 2017. He didn't gasp. He didn't deny it. He didn't cry. He just sighed. A long, disappointed sigh, as if she were a child who had failed a math test. You went into my safe, he said. His voice was devoid of emotion. That was a violation of trust, Elena. Violation of trust? She whispered, her voice rising. You let me inject myself with poison for 5 years. You let me cry myself to sleep. You let me believe I was broken. You are sterile, Mark. You have been sterile the whole time. She stood up, her legs shaking. Why? Why did you do it? If you didn't want kids, why didn't you just tell me? Why did you marry me? Mark stood up too. He was calm. Terrifyingly calm. He walked over to the window and looked out at the dark street. Because if I told you I didn't want kids, you would have left, he said simply. You were obsessed, Elena. Family, legacy, motherhood. It was all you talked about. So you tortured me instead? She screamed. I protected us. He shouted back, spinning around. His face was twisted now, the mask finally slipping. Look at you. You are weak. You are dependent. Who took care of you when you were sick from the treatments? Me. Who held your hand? Me. Who was the only constant thing in your life? Me. He took a step toward her. If you had a child, I would have been second place. I know how it works. The mother loves the child, and the husband becomes a paycheck. I wasn't going to let that happen. I wanted a wife, Elena. Not a mother. I wanted you to need me. And look, you needed me more than anyone in the world. The confession hung in the air like smoke. It was so twisted, so narcissistic, that Elena couldn't process it. He had manufactured her pain just so he could be the one to soothe it. And the powder? She asked, pointing at the tea. The drugs? Prednisone, he shrugged. And a little something to keep your mood manageable. You were getting hysterical. I needed to keep you balanced. Dr. Sterling agreed. He understands that a woman in your condition needs chemical assistance. Sterling knows? Of course Sterling knows. Who do you think gave me the prescription? He is a pragmatist. He knows I pay his bills. Elena looked at him with horror. She realized then that she wasn't arguing with a husband. She was arguing with a captor. I am leaving, she said. I am taking this recording, and I am going to the police. She reached for her phone under the cushion. Mark moved fast. He lunged across the coffee table, knocking the mugs onto the floor. The hot tea splashed across the rug. You are not going anywhere, he snarled, grabbing her wrist. You are sick, Elena. You are mentally unstable. Who are they going to believe? The successful lawyer or the hysterical wife who has been on heavy hormones for 5 years? I will have you committed. I have the medical records to prove you are psychotic. He squeezed her wrist hard. Sit down, Elena. No. She screamed, kicking him in the shin. He grunted but didn't let go. He twisted her arm behind her back, forcing her down onto the sofa. You are ruining everything. He hissed in her ear. We had a perfect life. Why couldn't you just be happy being taken care of? I hate you. She sobbed, struggling against his grip. Hate is better than indifference, he whispered. At least you are thinking about me. He reached for the other mug, his mug, the one without the poison, and grabbed a heavy glass coaster from the table. I think you need to sleep, Elena. You are having an episode. When you wake up, we will call Dr. Sterling. He will adjust your meds. He raised the heavy glass object. Elena saw the flash of violence in his eyes. He wasn't going to kill her. He was going to hurt her. He was going to knock her out and then gaslight her into believing she had fallen. He was going to rewrite reality again. But Elena wasn't the weak woman he thought he had created. The hormones had made her body soft, but the pain had made her will iron. She stopped struggling. She went limp. Mark hesitated, surprised by her sudden surrender. That is a good girl, he whispered, lowering the glass slightly. That was the mistake. Elena threw her head back, smashing it into his nose. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage. Mark roared in pain, his grip loosening just enough. Elena scrambled off the sofa. She didn't run for the door. She ran for the kitchen. She grabbed the knife block. Mark was stumbling, blood pouring from his nose, staining his perfect white shirt. He looked at her, his eyes wide with shock and rage. "Put the knife down, Elena," he warned, his voice thick with blood. "You are making a mistake." "No, Mark," she said, pulling out the largest chef's knife. Her hand was steady. Her voice was cold. "The mistake was thinking I was weak." She held the knife between them. The camera on the shelf was still recording. The red light blinked steadily, capturing every drop of blood, every threat, every second of the truth. "I sent the video," she lied. "Just like in the stories. It is already in the cloud." Mark froze. He looked at the bookshelf. He saw the tiny lens glinting between the cookbooks. For the first time in 5 years, Mark looked afraid. "You didn't," he whispered. "I did," she said. "Now get out. Get out of my house before I finish what the vasectomy started." Mark looked at the knife. He looked at the camera. He realized the narrative he had controlled for so long had just been snatched from his hands. He backed away, holding his broken nose. "You will regret this, Elena. You are nothing without me." "I would rather be nothing than be yours," she said. He turned and fled out the back door, leaving a trail of blood on the pristine white tiles. Elena stood in the kitchen, the knife still raised, listening to the sound of his car screeching out of the driveway. She didn't drop the knife. She didn't cry. She walked over to the camera, picked it up, and stopped the recording. Then she walked to the sink and poured the poison tea down the drain. She picked up the phone and dialed 911. "I would like to report an attempted murder," she said calmly. "My husband tried to poison me. I have it on video." The operator asked if she was safe. Elena looked at her reflection in the dark window. She looked bruised. She looked tired. But she looked alive. "Yes," she said. "I am safe. The tumor is gone." The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the suburban street in strokes of chaotic blue and red. Neighbors stood on their porches in bathrobes, whispering behind their hands as Mark was led out of his car in handcuffs. He had been intercepted 2 miles away, trying to book a flight on his phone while speeding. He didn't look like the confident executive anymore. His nose was taped, his shirt was stained with his own blood, and his eyes were wild with desperation. As they shoved him into the back of the squad car, he saw Elena standing in the doorway. She was wrapped in a blanket, holding a cup of tea, real tea this time. She didn't look away. She watched him disappear. The investigation was swift and brutal. The video Elena had recorded was the linchpin, but the physical evidence was a mountain. The toxicology report from the independent lab confirmed she had been ingesting toxic levels of prednisone and synthetic estrogen for years. The Menopur vials in the bathroom were tested and confirmed to be saline. But the real domino fell when the police raided Dr. Sterling's office. Faced with a federal indictment for medical malpractice and conspiracy to commit assault, Dr. Sterling didn't just fold. He crumbled. He handed over every email, every text message, and every bank transfer record between him and Mark. It turned out Mark hadn't just paid him $50,000. He had been paying him a monthly retainer to keep the charade going. Sterling testified that Mark had specifically requested a treatment plan that would maximize physical side effects, bloating, mood swings, fatigue, without causing permanent organ failure. He wanted her weak, but alive. The trial was the scandal of the year. The sterile sociopath, the headlines called him. Mark tried to plead insanity. He tried to claim he did it out of love, that he was trying to save their marriage from the stress of a child. The jury didn't buy it. They saw the video. They saw the spreadsheet Mark kept on his laptop, tracking her breaking points like stock market fluctuations. The verdict was unanimous. Mark was sentenced to 25 years for aggravated assault, poisoning, and coercive control. Dr. Sterling lost his medical license and was sentenced to 10 years. Elena didn't go to the sentencing. She was busy. 6 months later, Elena sat in a different doctor's office. This one didn't smell like money and lavender. It smelled like antiseptic and fresh coffee. It was a small clinic in a town 3 hours away, where nobody knew her name. Dr. Eris, a young woman with kind eyes and no hidden agenda, walked in holding a file. Elena braced herself. The trauma of the last 5 years was still a ghost in the room. She still flinched when she saw a needle. She still checked her food for strange powders. "Well, Elena," Dr. Eris said, smiling. "Your blood work is completely normal. Your liver enzymes have stabilized. The detox is officially complete." Elena let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for half a decade. "And, the other thing?" she asked, her voice small. Dr. Eris turned the screen around. There, in the center of the grainy black and white image, was a tiny, pulsing bean. "You are 8 weeks along, Elena. Strong heartbeat. Perfect implantation." Elena stared at the screen. She touched her stomach. There were no bruises there anymore. No needle marks. Just soft, healing skin. "But Dr. Sterling said I had a hostile uterus," she whispered. "He said I had low reserve." "Dr. Sterling was a liar and a criminal," Dr. Eris said firmly. "Your reproductive system is perfectly healthy. It always was. You were just being poisoned with stress and inflammatory drugs. The moment you stopped, your body did exactly what it was designed to do." Elena started to cry. But these weren't the tears of a broken woman in a bathroom. They were tears of pure, unadulterated victory. She wasn't defective. She wasn't broken. She was just free. She walked out of the clinic into the bright sunlight. She pulled her phone out of her purse. She had one last thing to do. She opened her email. She had a draft saved, addressed to an inmate number at the state correctional facility. Subject: the final update. She attached the ultrasound photo. The black and white image of the life growing inside her. Then she typed a single line. "You were the only disease I ever had. And now I am cured." She hit send. She didn't wait for a reply. She blocked the address, deleted the account, and threw the phone into the recycling bin on the corner. She walked to her car, where a man was waiting. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a smooth talker in a suit. He was a landscape architect with rough hands and a laugh that made her feel safe. He had met her in a grief support group, and he knew everything. He saw her coming and opened the door. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking at her tear-stained face. Elena looked back at the clinic. Then she looked at the sky. "Yes," she said, getting into the car. "Everything is perfect." As they drove away, Elena put her hand on her stomach. She thought about Mark, sitting in a concrete cell, staring at the photo of the child he had tried so hard to prevent. He would rot there, knowing that he hadn't broken her. He had only made her stronger. She turned on the radio. Music filled the car. For the first time in 5 years, Elena didn't feel like a patient. She felt like a mother. And more importantly, she felt like herself.